the biggest event in all of Warhammer 40K universe, is happening in Atlanta, Georgia in just a few days. It's called the World Championships of Warhammer, and it's an invitational to some of the greatest players across the entire world, where they all come together to find out who's the best of them all. In this episode, we're going to talk about the new rules update that they made exclusively for the WCW and break down exactly what they have in store for future updates in the Warhammer 40K universe. So stay tuned and don't you leave. So real quickly, I wanted to basically break down exactly what we're going to be talking about, which is specifically the World Championships rules update. All right. Now, they do detail in here that this is something in November or December will be updated in the Warhammer 40K world, right? Usually, and they've done this before, this invitational, and looks like they're going to continue to do this every single year, which I absolutely love. It is my absolute favorite event of the entire year. Thank you, Games Workshop, for putting this together. It's an absolute pleasure to be a part of this, even if I'm a spectator or I'm actually playing in it, or I'm just hanging out with my buddy in the narrative section, whatever it might be. It's absolutely one of the best events of the entire year. But they're going to continue to use this as a stepping stone for WCW to do FAQs right afterwards, right? They're going to have the best players in the world, so there's going to be a lot of interactions there. So what better of a place to have than to actually do some updates after this event? Because they're going to see some of the cheesiest, strongest, whatever you want to call it, stuff that there is in the entire Warhammer 40K universe. So they wanted to make some clarifications. They're going to talk about, specifically in this rules update, some changes that they're making for this event in the core rules, the Pariah Nexus mission deck as well. Also, some FAQs and some sneaky erratas that they put in here as well for some factions, right? For the Blood Angels and Dark Angels, they've made some erratas in here. And we're going to go ahead and break these down very shortly, bullet by bullet, every question to every answer, and tell you exactly what my sentiments are about all of these changes, how they affect the current state of the meta, and how it could potentially affect it in the future. All right. So one of the first things we're going to talk about that WCW exclusively made some FAQs and erratas to is in the core rules section. The first question being, can I make a reactive move, a move or other form of repositioning triggered by an event such as an enemy unit ending a move within a certain distance of a unit? So things from like Space Marines with Squad Tactics, Grey Knights with Mist of Demos, and the Tau with Crude Trail Shapers will not trigger when disembarking units outside of an already moved vehicle, because it's not a normal move. Even though you're moving 0, you cannot remain stationary, so you are still considered to have moved but not done a normal move, so you cannot trigger any of those abilities. The next question being, after my unit disembarks from a transport that has not yet moved this phase, my unit must make a normal or advanced move. When it ends that move, can an enemy unit make a reactive move? For this one, it's a yes. If the vehicle has not moved and the unit disembarks, it does count as moving even if you went 0 inches. Also explicitly states that yes, provided the conditions of that reactive move are met as well. So those things are triggered on this type of timing. The next question being, when a consolidation move towards an objective marker, can my model move in any direction as long as it ends closer to that objective marker and remains within range of it? This has been something for a very long time. I've told people, especially myself playing a close combat army, yes, you can move in any direction as long as you're getting closer. And it actually states that here as well. Note that the model cannot end that move any closer to the objective marker because it's already in basic base contact with the objective marker. It means you can't be overlapping it or being over it. I know a lot of us use those neoprene objective markers and get that confused a little bit. But in this situation, in all circumstances, for the objective marker and trying to hold them when consolidating, you can only get as close as you can get to that 40 millimeter portion. All right. And it's still considered consolidated, even though you don't make a consolidation move in the event that you're on top of the actual objective marker itself. The next question being, if I set up a transport using a rapid ingress stratagem, can units embarked within that transport disembark that phase? So this is a strange one. I thought they had, spoke about this a very long time ago when you could do these type of things, but for this particular event, they're saying that you can't. And once again, this is not an official document, but you can almost bet your bottom dollar that a lot of these things are going to be in effect and official with at the end of November or December. This one in particular with the rapid ingress is a weird one because it renders drop pods essentially useless. And as a TO myself, I would say that you still can use the drop pod ability because in the index slash codex, it states that the unit must disembark, and those units just can't simply just stay inside the drop pod. So in this niche, kind of situation, it does contradict another rule or data sheet in the game. But for those situations, I would go ahead and say that yes, it can absolutely jump out of a drop pod, but otherwise it cannot disembark. The last question for the core rules section being, can I use a stratagem that worsens the armor penetration characteristic of enemy attacks? Things like Armor of Contempt, Reinforced Hive Mind, things like that. When a unit fights on death specifically, and I want to say because of the wording on those particular rules, it affects your unit and fights on death is per model. That's exactly why they're not doing this, even though in some other situations, like World Eaters, where you have the ability to do like +1 damage that is completely triggered, essentially triggered at the same time. It allows you to do that, but they didn't want to allow it for like AOC and the reinforced hype. So going on to the next one. So the next one we're going to move into is the Pariah Nexus mission deck, where the WCW exclusively wanted to make some changes to some of the secondary missions and the match play interactions. The first question being, when scoring the overwhelming force secondary mission, how do I calculate the VP I gain for destroying one or more enemy units with an attached unit? If that attached unit started the turn within range of an objective marker, you score VP for each unit within that unit you destroyed this turn. For example, if you destroyed both the leader and the bodyguard units in the attached unit, you would score 5 VP. 3 VP times 2, but it's capped at 5. Which means that both of those units don't actually have to be on the objective marker. So some clarifications to some of the rulings that I've done previously at some of my GTs and super majors. This actually clarifies that entirely, because if you look in the little pamphlet, it's not super clear. It's very ambiguous until exactly how that works. Also, the next question being, if a unit that is part of an attached unit is destroyed and that attached unit was performing an action, the remaining unit of the attached unit still continue to do that action. Yeah, so if you precision a character out of that unit while they started a action, or vice versa, you still get to continue that action. Next one being, when using the smoke and mirrors mission rule, if you're selecting a transport with one or more units embarked within it. Do I use the combined points total of that transport and those embarked units for the 25% strategic reserves limit? Yes. This was some that was common knowledge. It was everything inclusively. So if you had multiple units in there, an attached unit in there with a character, multiple characters, and a transport, you would add up all of the points for the strategic reserves in that portion. The next question being, if my unit starts an action in my turn and completes at the end of the opponent's turn, can I target that unit that fires the Overwatch stratagem in my opponent's turn without causing the action to fail? Actually, if you read this in the pamphlet for the match play section for the Pariah Nexus, this is almost perfectly clear, where it only states that things in your turn, you're basically failing that action, except for it's specifying things like heroic intervention. But in other portions, like firing Overwatch, things like that, and I've actually done a video on this previously as well, how this functions entirely. So this is just more of a clarification to everyone and to myself, and making sure that we're all on the same page of comprehension when it comes to the world of Warhammer 40K, which can be challenging, and we all know that. And the last question being, can a unit from my army start to perform the terraform action on the same objective marker an enemy unit is currently performing that action on, but has not yet to complete? So this is a weird one. I thought basically whoever terraformed it, then you couldn't continue to terraform that one as the secondary player, right? But if someone is starting it, you're going to have to just completely destroy them off of that objective marker in order to stop them from doing that action. So you can't start the action simultaneously or one after the other to try to terraform for the Pariah Nexus mission deck. All right. And we're going to go into the faction rules. So on to the faction rules section, where it specifically talks about, in the first question, the Astra Militarum, Chaos Space Marines, and Thousand Suns. With the Vindicator variant of all of those factions, have a particular rule that makes it sound like it can shoot while within engagement range, because it sounds like an exception to the rule of big guns never tire. But they actually state on here that firing Overwatch is a big no. I thought this was pretty clear, as the rules itself states that you can't do so. But I can see why there was some confusion. Sometimes the codex/index trumps what's going on in the core rules, but this one specifically does not. And it's very ambiguous if you're reading it as well. Going on to the Astra Militarum, speaking on the Accolons, where this has been very contentious in the community. I know that I've had a few questions on this, if you can actually rapid ingress this unit, specifically with their precision drop. So they've made a clarification at the WCW to make it only in your movement phase. When this unit is set up on the battlefield using the deep strike ability, it can perform a precision drop. If it does, this unit can be set up anywhere in the battlefield that is more than 3 inches horizontally away from all enemy units. But until at the end of the turn, it is not eligible to declare a charge, which is already in the rules itself. Also, the second question being, if a Accolon's unit from your army uses its servo sentry ability, can I target that unit with the grenade stratagem in the same turn? So this one has been not as contentious, but very confusing, where it has been ambiguous to read this. This is nothing new when we're reading the Warhammer 40K rules. This is a big no as well. So you can either decide to not use your additional D6 flamers and do a grenade, which in my experience, grenades are usually better because they do mortal wounds, and a lot less things can actually stop that from being effective to that unit. So this is also a no, and there was a clarification for that. Also, they clarified that the Black Templars, if a unit is targeted with a fervent acclamation stratagem and a model, and that unit is the bearer of the enhancement from the Righteous Crusaders detachment. For the purposes of that enhancement, is the Templar Vow I selected when using that stratagem active in the same way as the Templar Vow that is active for my army? That is a big yes. And an errata that they completely made for the Blood Angels Death Company Dreadnought, Driven by Fury ability. So the Driven by Fury ability in your opponent's shooting phase, each time an enemy unit has shot, if this model was hit by one or more of those attacks, it can make a Driven by Fury move. To do so, roll 1d6 and add 2 to the roll. This model moves a number of inches up to the result, but must finish as close as possible to the closest enemy unit, excluding aircraft. When doing so, this model can be moved within engagement range of that enemy unit, which most of these rules are like that. World Leaders has one like that as well. Berserkers, the uh, the actual dreadnought, things like that. So a model cannot make a driven by fury move while it's battle shocked or within engagement range of one or more enemy units, and can only make one driven by fury move per phase. So I think this is a great clarification, so a lot of people can understand exactly what's going on with this. Continuing on with the faction rules, we have the Chaos Knights question. Can I use the Knights of Shade stratagem after rolling my charge roll for a unit targeted with that stratagem? So this is for the Kool-Aid Man ability where you're able to move over models and move through a ruin. So what this allows you to do is roll for example, a 10-inch charge and then decide if you want to run through those ruins or move over those models. The Dark Angels, going on to the next one, is an errata and an FAQ as well. Specifically talking about the Watchers and the Dark War Gear ability for the Terminator Squad and the Deathwing Knights. So what they've changed in here is the Watcher in the Dark once per battle in any phase, just after a mortal wound is allocated to an Adeptus Astartes model in this unit. This unit can summon a Watcher in the Dark. When it does, until the end of the phase, models in that unit have the Feel No Pain 4+ ability against mortal wounds. So this before, as we talked about on multiple iterations of my episodes, where this previously did not work with the timing and sequencing with things like Doombolt. I don't know why it wasn't able to be used previously. I think it was just a complete oversight in the timing and sequencing, and that's been an ongoing issue with the Games Workshop writing team and things like that, and abilities specifically. So I'm super happy that this actually works. I am not a Dark Angels player by no means at all, but I do like when rules seamlessly fit in perfectly and how they're supposed to be intended. And this sounds like they've made the correct errata to this one in particular. Next question being, as a controlling player, can I choose when to activate Lionel Johnson's once per turn all secrets revealed ability? That's a yes. So he gets to choose exactly when he can do it. So there's no timing and sequencing issues with that. For the Death Guard question, if I have an infected objective marker, what happens if my opponent gains control of that objective marker, then loses it? If you've noticed, in October, there was an FAQ that talked about this slightly, but not specifically how it's being worded here. So you do continue to have that objective marker infected. You don't control it, obviously, any longer, but it continues to be infected until you control the objective marker, which is being infected and has and continues to have the Nurgle's Gift ability. So it's almost like it's turning off the ability while it's being in control by your opponent, but it stays infected and it no longer is controlled by you while your opponent controls it. Another one that's been contentious for a very long time when it comes to the Gene Stealer codes. When setting up a unit using the Cult Ambush Army rule, if my opponent has an ability that places restrictions on where my reserves units can be set up, which this previously wasn't specified if it was a reserve unit, if it was a reposition unit, it never fit in perfectly to any of those rules, in particular to the core rules. Now there is some direct clarifications, and I'm so happy they made this clarification for this. So things like Omni Scramblers would affect the Cold Ambush Army rule to be affected by this. So that means that these units are reserved, so things that will affect units in reserves will be affected by those particular abilities as well. And going on to the remaining faction rules that was exclusive for WCW changes and should all be official for us publicly in the near future. By the end of November or December is what they stated in the beginning of the document, just like I stated in the beginning of this show. So going on to the Grey Knights, as the controlling player, can I choose when to activate Caldro Dragos? Isn't that misspelled? I believe is Caldor Dragos, once per ability, one with the warp ability. It's kind of ironic when you are the owner of the name, creator of the name, and you misspell it, but it's just an oversight. I completely understand. We are all human, but yes, you can use this ability. So what this allows you to do, it sounded like in the ability itself, it just automatically triggered no matter what. If you had a 1-inch charge, this gives you the ability to choose when you can do this and activate it. For the Space Marine section, there is another question where it states, while using the Gladius Task Force detachment, does the combat doctrine need to be active for your army in order to use the adaptive strategy stratagem? No. I thought this is something that's been being clarified in multiple things, like in the Space Wolf section, where a lot of abilities are those abilities, even though it states ambiguously that it's not those abilities. So this one states that it does not have to be active. And for the final one, another one that was talked about in October as well when it came to the tank commander and his hazardous. For the Hell Blasters being destroyed by another attack or hazardous test, can that unit use for the chapter ability? No. It seems like Games Workshop wants to make it clear that hazardous tech tests and any attacks coming in from your opponent are clearly abilities that will trigger your for the chapter ability. The Hellblaster specifically states that anything else that is not these certain attacks or a hazardous test does not trigger that ability. Something that they clarified as well for the tank commander in October. So that's it for all of the rules. And I'm going to give a quick outro. Thank you. Thank you so much to everyone who participated and watched to the very end. I'm very excited about this document, but just as a disclaimer and to remind you again, this is not an official document. This is only being used for WCW. Are some of the things in here going to be taken out, plucked out, and used in an upcoming FAQ and errata? Sure. They even detail that in there where they say they're going to use either all of it or some of it in the future to make sure the game is a lot more streamlined and better. But obviously, they're going to go through the entire event, see how it operates and works there, see if they need to make any changes with the actual game designers, and move on and drop us something to the public in November or December. So I hope you really enjoyed the show. I can't wait to see everyone there at WCW if you're actually going to attend. I will be there with a very good friend of mine named Tim. So come out, check it out. You're going to see me with this jersey on. You're going to see me around doing a couple of things. Come by, say hello to me, shake my hand, whatever it might be. Hopefully, I see you and you take care. You have a great one, or you see it online on stream, Twitch, whatever it might be. Hopefully, you get to enjoy the WCW just like I'm going to enjoy it. And as a reminder, Onslaught Gaming 40K, where victory is just a strategy away. Take care, everyone. Have a great one.